kicked out my cheating husband after he wanted me to raise the secret daughter he had with his mistress who passed away. I refused to do it, so my MIL is calling me the villain now. So I, 26F, have been married for almost 2 years. My husband Kyle, 26M, and I met around the time that we graduated from college at a frat party. We were in different departments and I had seen him around college, but we didn't really interact much. Our friends had dragged us to the party because it was one of the last before the semester ended. Both of us were having a terrible time there as we are kind of introverted and parties are not really our thing, especially once people were getting drunk and throwing up all over the place. So, I kept insisting that I wanted to leave, but my friends didn't. They saw Kyle was leaving and asked him to walk with me instead. We ended up walking together and started talking. It was nice, so we exchanged numbers at the end of it. Then we started texting, and soon after graduation, we started dating. We were in a relationship for almost 4 years before he finally popped the question, and we got married. We had our ups and downs, but most of it was petty and unimportant. There were no big fights. Not when we were dating, and not even after we got married. I never suspected him of cheating or anything of the sort because it never occurred to me, and his behavior around me was always perfectly normal. I thought he was in love with me, and he insists that he still is, but clearly, that was not the case because otherwise, he would not have cheated on me. About 3 weeks ago, Kyle came back home with a little girl in his arms who I had seen very few times before, but I realized that it was the daughter of one of his friends. He didn't offer up any explanation himself when he walked into the house after work with a child in his arms, so I had to ask him what this was all about. He didn't tell me anything until he had set the girl down on the couch with his phone and put on something. Then he took me aside to the bedroom. The way he was behaving was really freaking me out, and I could tell that something bad was about to happen. I just had a sixth sense telling me that something was very off. Once we were inside the bedroom, he sat me down and told me that he had something he had to tell me. He started off by telling me that he still loved me more than anything in this world, and that what he was about to tell me might make me feel otherwise, but I needed to remember that we were meant to be together. Instantly, I knew that the child was his, but I still let him talk because I was hoping against all odds that there would be some innocent explanation for the little girl sitting in our living room. However, when he started talking, I knew that it was all over. He told me that it had all started a week before we were supposed to get married because that's when it had started really hitting him that he was getting married and now he had to spend the rest of his life with one person. Like most guys do, he got cold feet and was about to make a run for it the night before the wedding, but one of his friends caught him in the act. Now, this friend of his, who passed away recently, let's call her Nikki, had been smoking in the parking lot and was apparently on a phone call outside because that was the only place she could get a signal, which is why she had been able to catch him before he got into his car. She had noticed the duffel bag that he had packed for the quick getaway and figured out what was going on, so she tried to calm him down and tell him that it would all be fine. She even got into the car with him and tried to talk him out of it, but they ended up making out in the car. He and Nikki had known each other for a really long time since they went to high school together, and I had always suspected that Nikki had a thing for him, but there was no proof of it, so I never said anything about it. She would always be nice to me as well, so I had no reason to bring it up and make a big deal out of it. But I always had a gut feeling that she thought of Kyle as more than a friend, and had I not been part of the equation, she probably would have tried to get with him anyway. Kyle told me that he ended up spending the night before our wedding with her, and they slept together because he was nervous and she was the only person who had been around. He said that he hadn't been thinking straight, and that as soon as he realized what he had done, he decided to apologize to her and leave so he could come back to his own room and get married to me because I was the one person he actually loved. He left her room at around 4 in the morning and came back to his own room immediately, so nobody saw him leave at any point, and so he had been able to keep this a secret for quite a long time. Nikki also didn't bring it up later, and they decided that whatever had happened on the night before our wedding had been nothing but a huge mistake, and so they were never going to talk about it ever again because she knew that he was happy with me, and he had made up his mind that he wanted to be with me. I wish I could say that that was it, but unfortunately, a few weeks later, Nikki reached out to Kyle yet again because she was pregnant. That's when everything started going topsy-turvy because they hadn't accounted for this happening at all, and both of them had been caught off guard by the news. But Nikki decided that she was going to keep the baby and had given Kyle the chance to either walk away from having a relationship with the child, or he could choose to be an active part of the baby's life. Kyle chose to co-parent their child together. He didn't sign away the parental rights that he had and was there for Nikki every step of the way. He would attend most of the appointments that she had with her OBGYN, and even on the day of her birth, he was with her all along. It was quite easy to fool me because every time he had to be with Nikki, he would just tell me that he had to go on a work trip, and he would be gone. I knew that she was pregnant. I had also congratulated her, and even on the day of our first anniversary together, she had been invited to the party. But little did I know that the baby she brought to the party was my husband's. The story that Nikki told everyone was that she got pregnant while hooking up with a dating app match, and the guy didn't want to be a part of the pregnancy and the child's life, so she was a single mom now. The story was believable enough, so nobody questioned questioned it, and her daughter had very normal features, so it never occurred to me that she looked similar to Kyle. Kyle and Nikki had been in touch even after the wedding, and she had even been to our house several times after that on many occasions. I never noticed anything off about the way they behaved around each other, so it was quite easy for them to fool me. Nikki rarely ever brought her daughter along, so I would only see her in pictures, which is why I hadn't been able to recognize her when my husband brought her in last time. He told me that he had been supporting them and would visit them every chance he got just to be close to his daughter. He promised me that there was nothing between him and Nikki and that they had ended their affair after that night before the wedding. There had never been anything before or after it. It had just been one night, but he had continued to stay in touch with her because they had a parental agreement and shared custody of their daughter. He also had to pay child support, and he really wanted to be a part of his daughter's life, so he couldn't walk away from her. Unfortunately, Nikki passed away a month ago in a deadly car accident because a drunk truck driver had collided with her car. Their daughter had been living with her parents for the past few weeks, but now Kyle had decided that it was finally time to tell me the truth, and he wanted me to accept him and his daughter so she could have a mother, and we could be a family together. After I had heard his entire story and processed it, I had no idea what he was going to tell me next because I was in shock. But the second he told me that he expected me to actually raise his daughter as my own after he just told me that he had cheated on me and slept with his friend the day before we were supposed to get married, I flipped out. I started screaming at him hysterically and told him that I was never going to accept him or his daughter because what he had done to me was something that I could never forgive. I told him that the fact that he had even asked me and expected me to say yes showed me just how entitled he was and how tone-deaf and insensitive he could be. I had a total breakdown, and I remember cursing him out while throwing everything in the room here and there. I had a full-blown meltdown, and once it was over, I decided that I was not going to let him live here anymore. While I had been having my episode, Kyle was just standing around and trying to calm me down by saying meaningless things so that we could work it out, and that he knew I didn't mean anything I was saying because I was just angry. He told me that even though his daughter was partly Nikki's, it was also partly his, and he knew that I would come to accept her in time. So I told him that,